Newlyweds vanished on honeymoon. 12 years later, an island discovery changes everything. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that would change everything. Detective Ray Morrison had seen plenty of drowning cases in his 23 years on the force, but this one was different. The fishing boat Maria's Hope had dragged up more than just nets full of tuna from the deep waters near Coral Ridge. Tangled in their lines was the broken hull of what appeared to be a pleasure craft, and inside that hull were two skeletons, still wearing the tattered remains of what might have once been tropical clothing. "Been down there a long time," Morrison muttered to his partner as they examined the wreckage on the dock. The boat's name had been worn away by years of salt water, but the registration numbers were still faintly visible. Within hours, they had their answer. The Sunset Dream had been reported missing 12 years ago. Its passengers, newlyweds Sarah and Marcus Whitmore, who had vanished without a trace during their South Pacific honeymoon cruise. The discovery sent shockwaves through the media. The Whitmore case had captivated the public for months after their disappearance. Sarah, a 28-year-old art teacher from Portland with luminous green eyes and an infectious laugh, had married Marcus, a quiet but devoted marine biologist, in a ceremony that friends described as straight out of a fairy tale. Their honeymoon was supposed to be a 3-week island-hopping adventure through some of the most beautiful waters on Earth. Instead, they had simply vanished. The Coast Guard had searched for weeks. Their families had hired private investigators. Conspiracy theories had flourished on internet forums. But eventually, the case had gone cold, becoming another unsolved mystery that haunted the families left behind. Now, finally, there was closure. The evidence was overwhelming. Among the skeletal remains, investigators found a gold wedding band engraved with "S&M Forever June 15th, Sarah's wedding ring. More compelling still was the waterlogged passport, its pages fused together by 12 years of salt water and pressure. When the forensics team carefully separated the pages, Sarah's name was clearly visible on the badly damaged document, along with fragments of her photograph. "Case closed," Morrison announced to the press 3 days later, standing behind a podium heavy with microphones and camera flashes. "After 12 years of questions, the Whitmore family finally has answers. Sarah and Marcus Whitmore died at sea, most likely during a storm. Their remains will be returned to their families for proper burial." The headlines wrote themselves. "Mystery solved, honeymoon couple found after 12 years. Ocean gives up its secrets. Whitmore case finally closed." Sarah's parents, Harold and Margaret Chen, flew in from California for what they hoped would be a final press conference. Margaret wept openly as she clutched her husband's arm. "We never stopped hoping," she whispered to reporters. "But now we can lay our daughter to rest." The only family member notably absent was Sarah's younger sister, Eliza. Eliza Chen had always been the rebel of the family. Where Sarah had been the golden child, valedictorian, art scholarship recipient, beloved teacher, Eliza had dropped out of college to become a freelance photographer, spending her days chasing storms and her nights developing film in her converted garage darkroom. She had loved her sister fiercely, but their relationship had been complicated by years of comparison and a terrible fight just weeks before Sarah's wedding. "You're running away," Eliza had accused her sister during their last conversation. "You barely know this guy, and now you're rushing into marriage because you're scared of being alone." Sarah had hung up on her. They never spoke again. For 12 years, that final conversation had haunted Eliza. She had been the only family member who never fully accepted the official search and rescue conclusion. While everyone else moved on, Eliza had kept a cork board in her apartment covered with maps, newspaper clippings, and theories about what might have really happened to her sister. She had even taken several trips to the South Pacific on her own, armed with nothing but a camera and desperate hope. So when the news broke about the skeletal remains, Eliza felt something she hadn't expected, not relief, but suspicion. She was alone in her Portland apartment, surrounded by the familiar smell of developing chemicals and the soft red glow of her darkroom lights, when the package arrived. The delivery came just after sunset on the Friday following the press conference. No return address. No postmark. Just her name written in block letters that made her hands tremble. Inside the unmarked envelope was a single item, a micro SD card. Eliza's heart hammered as she slid the card into her laptop. The file directory showed one video, dated just 3 months ago. With shaking fingers, she double-clicked. The image quality was grainy, clearly shot on a phone or simple camera. But there was no mistaking what she saw. Sarah stood in front of a cascading waterfall, her dark hair now streaked with premature silver, her face bearing lines that spoke of years under a tropical sun. She looked older, weathered, but unmistakably alive. Beside her stood Marcus, his once clean-shaven face now sporting a thick beard, his skin deeply tanned. They both looked directly into the camera with expressions that were hard to read, not quite happy, not quite sad, but something in between. Something that looked almost like resignation. "My name is Sarah Chin Whitmore." Her sister's voice came through the laptop speakers, and Eliza nearly knocked over her coffee cup. "If you're watching this, then you probably think Marcus and I are finished. We're not. We're safe. We're..." Sarah paused, glancing at Marcus, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "We're where we need to be. Don't look for us. Please. Some things are better left alone." The video lasted only 37 seconds. When it ended, Eliza played it again. And again. And again. By the time she finally closed the laptop, the sun was rising, and everything she thought she knew about her sister's disappearance had crumbled to dust. The skeletons in the boat, the wedding ring, the passport, it was all wrong. Or worse, it was all staged. Sarah was alive. And for some reason, she didn't want to be found. Eliza looked across her apartment at the cork board that had dominated her life for over a decade. Maps of the South Pacific stared back at her, dotted with red pins marking every possible location where a boat might have gone down. She had spent years studying ocean currents, weather patterns, and shipping lanes. She had interviewed Coast Guard officers, charter boat captains, and local fishermen. Now she realized she had been asking the wrong questions entirely. The detective in charge of the case had declared it closed. Her parents had finally found peace. The world had moved on. But Eliza Chun was just getting started. 3 weeks later, Eliza stood on the deck of the Wanderer, a weathered fishing boat she chartered from a grizzled captain named Pete Nakamura. The boat cut through choppy waters 200 miles southeast of Fiji, following the same route the Honeymoon cruise had taken 12 years ago. "You sure about this heading, miss?" Pete called from the wheelhouse, his weathered hands steady on the wheel despite the growing swells. "GPS is acting up something fierce out here. Never seen anything like it." Eliza gripped the rail and studied the horizon. She'd spent weeks poring over the original cruise itinerary, cross-referencing it with weather reports from 12 years ago, ocean current maps, and every piece of evidence she could find. The video had been her only clue, but she'd analyzed every pixel. The waterfall in the background had distinctive rock formations, and the light suggested it was filmed during golden hour, facing west. "Stay on course," she told Pete. "Trust me." But even as she said it, Eliza felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean spray. Her compass was spinning lazily, unable to find magnetic north. The GPS screen flickered between coordinates that made no sense. Most unsettling of all, the birds that had been following them for days had suddenly disappeared, as if they knew something the humans didn't. Pete emerged from the wheelhouse, his face grim. "Miss Chen, I've been sailing these waters for 30 years, and I'm telling you something ain't right. The instruments are going haywire, and look at that sky." Eliza followed his gaze upward. The clouds were moving in unnatural patterns, swirling counterclockwise in a way that defied the trade winds. The water beneath them had taken on an odd, almost iridescent quality, like oil on pavement. "There's something out there," Pete muttered, pointing toward a dark smudge on the horizon that hadn't been there moments before. "Land that's not on any chart I've ever seen." Eliza's heart raced. This was it. This was what she'd been looking for. As they drew closer, the dark smudge resolved into a lush, mountainous island covered in dense tropical vegetation. Waterfalls cascaded down its cliffs, and she could see white sand beaches that looked untouched by human presence. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's wrong," Pete countered. "I've mapped these waters 100 times. There's no island here. There's supposed to be 3,000 feet of empty ocean." But as they approached, the wrongness became more apparent in other ways. The water around the island moved strangely, creating eddies and currents that seemed to push back against their approach. Twice, Pete had to gun the engine to prevent them from being swept away from the island entirely. "It's like it doesn't want visitors," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool ocean breeze. When they were still 50 yards from shore, disaster struck. A massive wave appeared from nowhere, not breaking over them, but rising up from beneath the boat like a liquid mountain. The Wanderer was lifted and slammed down with tremendous force. Eliza heard the sickening crack of the hull splitting. "We're taking on water!" Pete shouted. "Grab the life raft!" But even as they scrambled to deploy the emergency equipment, another wave hit them, this one driving the boat toward a small cove with crushing force. Eliza felt herself thrown through the air, salt water filling her lungs, until she crashed into the shallows near the beach. When she finally dragged herself onto the sand, coughing and gasping, she found Pete unconscious but breathing nearby. The Wanderer was beached and broken, its hull cracked open like an egg. They were stranded. As Eliza sat on the pristine beach, wringing water from her hair, she noticed something that made her skin crawl. Their footprints in the sand were already being erased by waves that seemed to appear only when needed for that purpose. The normal rhythm of the tide was nowhere to be found. "We need to find shelter," Pete said when he came to, his voice shaky. "And fresh water. And a way to signal for rescue." But Eliza was already walking inland, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain. The jungle was unnaturally quiet. No bird calls, no insect buzzing, just the sound of her own footsteps on the soft earth. 20 minutes into the forest, she found the first sign that she was on the right track. Suspended between two palm trees was a simple rope swing, its wood smoothed by years of use. Beyond it, carved into the bark of a massive banyan tree, were letters that made her knees weak. SCW. Sarah Chin Whitmore. Her sister had been here. Was still here, if the video was recent. "Sarah!" Eliza called out, her voice echoing strangely in the humid air. "Sarah, it's Eliza! I got your message!" But the only response was silence, and the unsettling feeling that the island itself was listening. Pete caught up to her minutes later, out of breath and clearly rattled. "This place gives me the creeps," he said. "Something's not natural about it. The way the waves hit us, the way the compass spins, it's like the island was protecting itself." Eliza was about to respond when she spotted something else. A flat stone slab at the base of the banyan tree, deliberately placed and weighted down with smaller rocks. With trembling hands, she moved the stones aside and found a leather-bound journal wrapped in waterproof plastic. The first page, written in Marcus's familiar handwriting, contained words that changed everything. "Day 1847 on the island. If someone finds this, you need to know the truth. We didn't die in that storm 12 years ago. We chose to disappear. But now I'm not sure we ever had a choice at all." Eliza's hands trembled as she opened Marcus's journal, Pete reading over her shoulder in the fading afternoon light. The leather cover was worn smooth from years of handling, and the pages were filled with Marcus's precise handwriting, the same careful script she remembered from the biology notes he used to share with Sarah in college. Day 3, June 18th. "Sarah and I had the worst fight of our marriage today. She thinks I'm being controlling about the itinerary, and maybe she's right. I planned every detail of this honeymoon cruise, but she wants spontaneity. She wants adventure. So when that charter boat captain offered to take us to secret spots the big cruise ships never see, Sarah's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Against my better judgment, we left the main cruise and boarded his small boat, the Coral Rose. I should have trusted my instincts." Eliza flipped ahead, her heart pounding. Day 5, June 20th. "We're stranded. The storm came from nowhere, Not the gentle tropical shower the captain predicted, but something fierce and unnatural. The coral rose is gone, along with Captain Rodriguez. We managed to swim to this island as it broke apart around us. Sarah says we're lucky to be alive. I'm not sure luck has anything to do with what happened. This place, there's something wrong with it. The plants glow at night, not like bioluminescence, but with their own internal light. The fruit tastes like nothing I've ever experienced, too sweet, too perfect. And the animals, their tracks change direction mid-stride, as if they remember suddenly that they were supposed to be somewhere else. Day 30. We've been here a month now. No rescue planes, no ships on the horizon. It's as if the world has forgotten we exist. But Sarah is different here, happier than I've ever seen her. She spends hours painting watercolors of the island's impossible sunsets. She says this place is teaching her things about color that art school never could. I'm starting to understand what she means. My dreams here are more vivid than waking life. I dream of ocean currents I've never studied, of fish species that don't exist in any textbook. When I wake, I find myself drawing detailed diagrams of their anatomy, as if my subconscious has become a marine biology library I never knew I possessed. Eliza skipped ahead months, watching their story unfold in Marcus's increasingly erratic handwriting. Day 365, 1 year. Sarah wants to stay. She says we've found paradise, and maybe she's right. The island provides everything we need: fresh water that tastes like liquid diamonds, fruit that never rots, whether that's never too hot or too cold. We've built a home here, a real home, not just shelter. But I've been thinking about our families. About the search parties that must have given up by now. About Sarah's parents, who probably think their daughter is finished. I suggested we try to signal a passing ship, and Sarah, she became someone I didn't recognize. Her eyes went cold, and she said, "Why would we want to go back to that world of schedules and expectations and people who never understood us anyway?" She's not wrong. But she's not entirely right either. Day 400. We decided to fake our deaths. I know how that sounds, but it felt like mercy for our families. We collected bones from the caves on the island's east side, old bones, from shipwreck victims perhaps, or previous castaways. We dressed them in our clothes, put Sarah's ring on the appropriate finger, and sealed my spare passport, the one I thought I'd lost, in with them. We launched it all in a makeshift raft during the next storm. Let our families have closure. Let them grieve and move on. We've moved on too. Pete whistled low. They staged their own deaths. But Eliza was reading ahead, and what she found made her stomach turn cold. Day 1200. We tried to leave today. Built a raft, gathered supplies, waited for calm seas. But when we pushed off from shore, the ocean, it turned. Waves appeared from nowhere, not crashing over us but forming walls around the island. It was as if the sea itself was herding us back to shore. Sarah says the island doesn't want us to go. I'm starting to think she's right. But I'm also starting to think the island doesn't care what we want. Day 1500. The messages we've tried to send, bottles, flares, even smoke signals, they disappear. Not washed away or blown off course. They simply vanish, as if the island erases any evidence of our existence the moment it leaves its boundaries. Sarah has stopped talking about escape. She says this is where we belong now. She paints the same waterfall over and over, as if she's trying to capture something that keeps changing. When I ask her about it, she just smiles and says the island is teaching her patience. But patience for what? The final entry was dated only 2 months ago, and the handwriting was barely legible, as if written by someone whose hand was shaking uncontrollably. Day 1847. The island isn't letting us leave anymore. But sometimes, it doesn't feel like it's letting us stay either. Sarah sent a message somehow, to her sister, she says. The island allowed it, which means the island wanted it. But why? I think something is coming. Something is changing. The glowing plants have dimmed. The perfect fruit tastes bitter. Even the weather has become unpredictable. Sarah says her sister will understand. That Eliza was always the one who saw things others missed. If you're reading this, Eliza, then you found us. But you need to know, this island chooses its inhabitants. And once it chooses you, leaving isn't a matter of building a boat or waiting for rescue. It's a matter of whether the island decides to let you go. And lately, I don't think it's in a giving mood. Eliza closed the journal, her mind reeling. Pete stared at her with wide eyes. This is impossible, he whispered. Islands don't, they can't. But even as he spoke, the sun was setting, and around them, the jungle was beginning to glow with that same impossible light Marcus had described. Flowers pulsed with soft blue radiance. Vines shimmered with golden threads. The very air seemed to sparkle. And somewhere in the distance, carried on a breeze that smelled of jasmine and secrets, Eliza heard something that made her heart skip. The sound of her sister singing. Eliza followed the singing deeper into the jungle, leaving Pete behind despite his protests. The melody was one she remembered from childhood, a lullaby their mother used to hum while braiding their hair. But Sarah's voice was different now, deeper and more resonant, as if the years on the island had changed the very timbre of her vocal cords. The glowing vegetation grew brighter as night fell, creating an otherworldly pathway through the dense foliage. Eliza's footsteps made no sound on the soft earth, and when she looked back, she gasped. Her footprints were disappearing behind her, erased by some invisible force as if she had never been there at all. Eliza. Her name drifted through the trees, not quite Sarah's voice, not quite the wind. When she spun around to locate the source, she found only empty jungle, but she could swear she heard her name whispered again from a different direction. Time seemed to skip. One moment she was walking through dense undergrowth, the next she stood at the edge of a clearing she didn't remember approaching. The transition felt like waking from a dream, disorienting and seamless. In the center of the clearing stood a simple hut made from palm fronds and driftwood. Smoke curled from a small fire pit, and hanging from the eaves were dozens of watercolor paintings, all of the same waterfall, but each one slightly different, as if the artist was trying to capture something that kept changing. Sarah emerged from the hut like a ghost made flesh. 12 years had transformed her sister in ways that went beyond the sun-weathered skin and silver-streaked hair. Sarah moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost inhuman, and her eyes held depths that hadn't been there before, not just wisdom, but something that looked almost like resignation. Eliza, Sarah breathed, and suddenly she was running, closing the distance between them in heartbeats. When she wrapped her arms around her younger sister, Eliza felt tears she didn't know she'd been holding back spill down her cheeks. I thought you were finished. Eliza sobbed into Sarah's shoulder. The skeletons, the ring. I know. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. We had to make you stop looking. But why? Sarah, why would you put us through that? Before Sarah could answer, Marcus stepped out of the hut. The years had been harder on him than on Sarah. His beard was mostly gray now, and his eyes held a wariness that bordered on fear. When he saw Eliza, that fear deepened. You shouldn't have come, he said quietly. The island, it let you find us, which means it wants something. What are you talking about? Eliza looked between her sister and brother-in-law. Marcus, I read your journal. This place isn't letting you leave? That's impossible. Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look that spoke of years of shared secrets. Show her, Marcus said reluctantly. Sarah led Eliza to the edge of the clearing, where a narrow path wound down toward the beach. 3 years ago, we built a raft, Sarah explained. We loaded it with supplies, waited for perfect weather. We made it maybe 50 yards from shore before the sea changed. As if responding to her words, the ocean visible through the trees began to glow with the same ethereal light as the jungle. But this wasn't the peaceful phosphorescence Eliza had seen in nature documentaries. The water moved with purpose, forming patterns that looked almost like a vast, luminous brain. It's alive, Marcus said simply. Not in any way we understand life, but aware. Conscious. It feels our emotions, responds to our thoughts. When we're happy here, content, the island is paradise. Perfect weather, abundant food, incredible beauty. But when we try to leave, as if summoned by his words, the gentle evening breeze suddenly turned cold and sharp. The glowing plants dimmed, and somewhere in the distance, Eliza heard what sounded like thunder, though the stars were clearly visible overhead. When we fight its will, Sarah continued, it reminds us how small we are, how dependent on its mercy. That's insane, Eliza said, but even as the words left her mouth, she felt the truth of it. The way her footprints had vanished. The way time seemed to skip. The unnatural storm that had wrecked Pete's boat. We tried to contact the outside world for years, Marcus said. Letters in bottles, signal fires, even that video message to you. Everything disappeared except the video. The island allowed that one through. But why? Sarah took her sister's hands, and Eliza was startled by how warm they were, as if Sarah carried the island's tropical heat in her very bones. Because something is wrong, Sarah whispered. The island has been unstable lately. The balance is shifting. Marcus thinks it's because we've been here too long, that we're wearing out our welcome. But I think it's something else. What? I think it's lonely, Sarah said. I think it wants more than just the two of us. And now that you're here. The implications hit Eliza like a physical blow. No, I'm not staying here. I have a life, a career. Marcus interrupted gently. The moment you set foot on this island, your old life became a memory. The question now is whether the island will let any of us survive what comes next. As if in response to his words, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the ocean's glow intensified until it was bright as daylight. In the distance, Pete's voice could be heard shouting Eliza's name, but the sound seemed to come from very far away, as if the island was already beginning to separate her from the outside world. The storm is coming, Sarah said, her voice filled with an ancient sadness. The island is going to test us. All of us. And I'm not sure we're strong enough to pass. The first sign that something had fundamentally changed came at dawn. Eliza woke to find the tropical fruit Sarah had given her the night before blackened and crawling with insects that vanished the moment she looked directly at them. When she tried to drink from the crystal-clear spring behind the hut, the water turned bitter in her mouth, tasting of salt and decay. It's rejecting you, Marcus said quietly, watching from the doorway of the hut. His face was gaunt with exhaustion, as if he hadn't slept all night. The same thing happened to us when we first tried to leave. The island withdraws its gifts. Pete stumbled into the clearing minutes later, his clothes torn and his eyes wild with panic. The jungle, he gasped. It's moving. The paths keep changing direction. I've been walking in circles for hours, but every time I try to head back to the beach, I end up right back here. Sarah emerged from the hut, and Eliza gasped. Overnight, her sister had become visibly ill. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and when she moved, it was with the careful movements of someone in significant pain. What's happening to you? Eliza reached for her sister, but Sarah stepped back. The island is punishing me, Sarah said simply. For reconnecting with the outside world. For remembering what I left behind. Marcus knelt beside his wife, his hands hovering over her as if he wanted to touch her but was afraid. It started the moment you arrived, Eliza. Sarah began having dreams about home, about our old life, about you. The island doesn't allow that kind of attachment to the past. This is insane, Pete muttered, but his protest sounded hollow even to his own ears. Around them, the jungle was visibly shifting. Trees leaned inward as if listening to their conversation, and the morning light filtered through leaves that hadn't been there moments before. Eliza knelt beside her sister, ignoring Sarah's attempts to wave her away. There has to be something we can do. Some way to fight this. There is, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. We've been here long enough to understand the island's rules. It sustains peace only when its inhabitants completely let go of their past lives. No attachments to the outside world. No memories of who we used to be. We managed it for years, but your arrival reminded us that we used to be other people, Sarah finished. People who had families. People who were loved. The ground trembled beneath them, and in the distance, Eliza could see storm clouds gathering with impossible speed. But these weren't ordinary clouds. They moved with purpose, forming shapes that looked almost like faces, expressions of rage and disappointment. The island gave us a choice years ago. Marcus continued, his eyes fixed on the approaching storm. Forget everything that came before, or face the consequences. We chose to forget. But now it's too late for half measures, Sarah whispered. She struggled to her feet, her face twisted with pain. The island knows we've been tainted by memory, by love for people who aren't here. The storm was closer now, and with it came a sound that made Eliza's blood run cold, a howling that seemed to come from the earth itself, as if the island was screaming. Pete grabbed Eliza's arm. We need to get off this island. Now. Whatever's happening here, it's not natural. But Marcus shook his head. There's nowhere to run. The island controls everything, the weather, the tides, even time itself. The only way anyone leaves is if the island allows it. Then what are our options? Eliza demanded. Sarah looked at her sister with eyes that held 12 years of accumulated wisdom and sorrow. The island is going to give us one chance to restore balance. Either you leave, alone, and Marcus and I stay here and forget you ever came, or we all try to leave together, knowing that the island might finish us all rather than let us go. The storm hit the clearing like a physical force. Wind that felt solid as walls pressed against them from all directions. The glowing plants that had provided such beautiful light the night before now pulsed with angry red energy. Trees bent at impossible angles without breaking, and the very air crackled with electricity. In the chaos, Eliza heard the island's voice for the first time, not words, but emotions pressed directly into her mind. Loneliness so vast it threatened to drown her. Possessiveness that burned like acid. And underneath it all, a kind of alien love that was more terrifying than hate because it demanded everything in return. Choose, the voice seemed to say. Choose now. I won't leave without you. Eliza shouted over the howling wind, grabbing Sarah's hand. I lost you once. I won't lose you again. Sarah's grip tightened, and for a moment, her illness seemed to fade. Then we leave together. All of us. Even if it finishes us. Marcus finished. He moved to Sarah's other side, taking her free hand. Pete, if you want to survive this, stay close. The fisherman nodded grimly, understanding that their only chance lay in unity. Together, the four of them began walking toward the beach, fighting against wind that tried to push them back with every step. Behind them, the storm followed like a living thing, and Eliza could feel the island's rage growing with each step they took toward freedom. The ocean, when they reached it, was a wall of black water reaching toward the sky. But somewhere beyond that wall lay the world they had left behind, and Sarah had made her choice. She would rather die free than live as a prisoner in paradise. The makeshift raft they built from driftwood and palm fronds should never have survived the journey. As they pushed off from the beach, the island's fury reached a crescendo that defied the laws of nature. Waterspouts twisted around them like serpents, and waves the size of buildings crashed down from impossible angles. But somehow, miraculously, they held together. Eliza would later remember only fragments of that crossing, Sarah's hand gripping hers with desperate strength, Pete's hoarse voice shouting navigation commands that made no sense in the chaos, and Marcus quietly repeating coordinates like a prayer. The ocean around them was alive with the island's rage, but as they pushed further from shore, something extraordinary happened. The moment their small raft crossed some invisible boundary, the storm simply stopped. 1 second they were fighting for their lives against supernatural fury, and the next they were floating on calm seas under ordinary stars. When Eliza looked back, the island was gone, not fading into the distance, but gone as if it had never existed at all. She woke up 3 days later in a medical clinic in Suva, Fiji, with no memory of how they'd gotten there. A local fishing boat had found them drifting unconscious in their raft, severely dehydrated but alive. Pete was in the next bed, his weathered face bearing the haunted expression of a man who had seen something that shouldn't exist. But Marcus was not with them. Where is he? Eliza asked Sarah, who sat beside her bed looking pale and confused. Where's Marcus? Sarah's eyes were vacant, as if she was looking through Eliza rather than at her. Marcus? I don't remember anyone named Marcus. Was he on the boat with us? The doctors explained it as trauma-induced memory loss, a psychological defense mechanism triggered by their ordeal at sea. They said Sarah's memories might return gradually, or they might never return at all. But Eliza knew the truth. The island had taken its price for letting Sarah go. Marcus had chosen to stay behind, and in return, the island had erased him from Sarah's memory as if he had never existed at all. The world still believed the Newlyweds had died 12 years ago. The skeletal remains had been buried with full honors, and the case was officially closed. It would have been impossible to explain what had really happened, and who would have believed them anyway. Eliza let the story stand. She brought Sarah back to Portland, telling their parents that she had found her sister suffering from amnesia on a remote island, the sole survivor of a boating accident. It wasn't entirely a lie, and it was all the truth the world could handle. For months, Eliza watched her sister struggle to rebuild a life she couldn't remember losing. Sarah moved through the world like a ghost, painting watercolor after watercolor of the same waterfall, though she claimed she had no idea why the image haunted her dreams. I feel like I'm missing something, Sarah told her one evening as they sat in Eliza's garden. Like there's a part of my life that's been cut out, but I can't remember what it was. Maybe that's okay, Eliza said gently. Maybe some things are better forgotten. But late at night, when Sarah thought no one was watching, Eliza would find her standing at the window, staring westward toward the Pacific with an expression of infinite longing. Slowly, gradually, Sarah began to heal. She took a job at a local art school, teaching children to see the world through colors and shapes. She laughed again, though never quite as freely as she once had. She even began dating someone, a kind architect named David who didn't ask questions about the 12 missing years of her life. It was on a warm spring morning, 6 months after their return, that Eliza found her sister kneeling in the garden with tears streaming down her face. Sarah? What's wrong? Her sister looked up, holding something in her cupped hands. It was a flower unlike anything that grew in Portland, a luminous blue orchid that seemed to glow with its own internal light. I planted regular daffodils here yesterday, Sarah whispered. But this morning I found this. And when I touched it, she closed her eyes and for a moment, her expression was heartbreakingly peaceful. For just a second, I remembered being happy. Really, truly happy. With someone whose name I can't recall, but whose love I can still feel. Eliza knelt beside her sister, staring at the impossible flower. It was beautiful and terrible, a reminder that some paradises exact too high a price for entry, but also proof that love, even forgotten love, could transcend any boundary. Do you want me to help you remember? Eliza asked quietly. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, cradling the glowing orchid like something precious. Finally, she shook her head. No, she said. I think some gifts are meant to be felt, not understood. And whoever he was, wherever he is now, I think he would want me to be happy more than he would want me to remember. She planted the orchid carefully in the corner of the garden, where it would catch the morning sun. And every day after that, as it grew and bloomed with impossible beauty, Sarah would tend to it with the gentle care of someone nurturing a memory they couldn't quite grasp but refused to let die. The island had taken Marcus, but it had also given Sarah something in return. The ability to love without the pain of loss, to feel joy without the weight of the past. It was a cruel mercy, but it was mercy nonetheless. And sometimes, on warm spring mornings when the light hit the garden just right, Eliza could have sworn she saw two figures standing by the glowing orchid, Sarah and a bearded man whose face was kind and whose love transcended memory itself. Some truths, she had learned, were too strange for headlines. But they were perfect for quiet gardens and sisters who had found each other again.